Kilkenny won the All Ireland in 2002, 2003, and then Cork came along and won 04 and 05. So they were going for 3 in a row in 06. And I remember being on an all-star trip in Boston that year, and the Cork lads, the Cork lads didn't really mix with the Limerick or the Tip or the Waterford lads on that tour, and it was very much a sense of they had their own itinerary organised. They had, and in fairness, they did. They just did different things every day, and they had a schedule organised. And there was a sense then that Cork had separated themselves from the rest of hurling, or certainly that team wanted that sense to be out there. And we all remember what happened in 2006 when a Brian Cody, who was being written off as old school, and the game had kind of passed him by, and JJ would remember that game in the All-Ireland final. There was an intensity to that game, that Cork-Kilkenny final. Cork didn't score very much in that final, but it was very much the day that I think the era of Kilkenny's greatness under Cody was really established.
Ger, I can't help but notice you smiling. And Vincent described the Corkness, shall we say, even. Just talk to me through your own kind of memories of that rivalry back then.
Yeah, I was involved that time, Michael. I was selected with John Allen that time in 2006. I think our whole we had a very good team at the time. Like, we hit for 3 in a row. Like, there was a lot of great players on that team, and we kind of struggled all the way through. I think we had 12 or 13 championship matches unbeaten before we got to the final, but we were lucky in the semi-finals. We were barely getting over the line. We got an onslaught that day. Like, I think that was the first time when you saw people talk about tactics, but whatever happened that day with Brian Cody's team with Kilkenny, they pulled people back. They crowded everything. They made it very, very physical. We just weren't ready for it on the day. We weren't expecting that sort of scenario. And on the day, Kilkenny were the better side, and like they had a ferocious hunger that day in relation to just being the better side. They were physical. We were playing a running team. Like, our game was really support the guy in the ball. But when you're hit all over the place like that, that's we were stopped. And at the end of it, there was only a goal in it. There was still only one puck of a ball in it. So that, I suppose, what was disappointing about that then, Michael, was that was the end of that team to an extent. That was the end. A lot of fellas moved on. John moved on. Brian Corcoran finished and that sort of stuff. So there was a few people pulled away. That was the end of an era from that point of view, because looking back on it, I think people in Cork certainly look back on that team with a lot of warmth and what I love, because they were a great team to follow at the time and support at the time.
John, you've a fairly storied history with Cork, between the 3 goals, the I love me county, everything. Like, what are your memories of that Cork team in particular coming against? They seem to bring out the best in you as well.
Yeah, but I suppose looking back on history now, I think history will be good to both those sides. I think history will state that probably Kilkenny back then were probably the greatest team of all time, but that Cork team were an incredible side as well. They were well good enough to win 3 in a row. 2 top class sides. We weren't too far away from, it just goes to show you how good a team we had at the time. We were probably the third team in the country back then. We had some formidable battles against Cork. 0-3. They beat us in the Munster final, scored 3 goals, and then sent off the following year. We beat them in the Munster final, an incredible game. And then when we went to play Kilkenny, then I was actually suspended. I actually thought Kilkenny were actually there for the taking that year, even in the semi-final. I'm not saying it just because I was missing, but I felt if I was playing that day, I was actually flying at that year, that we probably could have beaten Kilkenny in 2-4. 2-5 Cork beat us, and they beat us in the quarter-final, and then 2-6 we played Cork in the All Ireland semi-final, and we got beaten by point. Ken Donald Cusick tipped the ball onto the bar, and Cork won out by a point, and then they were meeting Kilkenny down to go for 3 in a row. But what people forget about that final, I think, remember the length of the grass that day. I think in the All Ireland final, I think someone forgot to put the lawnmowers in, albeit they had their tactics right, but I think I remember then that day specifically that I couldn't get over the length of the grass, that the grass was after going up most certainly an inch that day. But that game, I suppose, was
you're saying nothing.
But that game was the turning point for Kilkenny. I mean, they became a monster then, and I suppose they never looked back from from 06 on. I suppose the only time we met that Kilkenny team was, well, when we were I would have liked to have played Kilkenny when we were probably at the peak of our powers, maybe 04 or 05, 06, but then we met them in a National League final in 07 and we beat Kilkenny, but 12 months later, I mean, their physical size within the space of 12 months was, how they developed was colossal. Like, I remember going out with Jackie Tyrrell but the last 10, 15 minutes of that league final in 07, and you know, he wasn't half the man that he was 12 months later. He just became a monster, and I think whatever training or whatever, you know, project they went off and done from there on in, I mean, they just became, you know, unstoppable, like, you know. But
if anyone has any landscaping questions, I think John will field them as well. He seems to know that with the length of the grass. Just Conor, on a point that Vincent made there about the kind of styles clash maybe between Kilkenny and Cork, like they were kind of opposites, weren't they? And even Donlog made the remark in his book about the Stepford wives, and he kind of maybe likened Kilkenny to robots somewhat. Like they were poles apart, really, the two kind of sides, weren't they?
Yeah, I'm sitting beside JJ here, so I'm going to have to reserve judgment on what Donald said in his book, but no, they were, and there was a sense as well with Cork that they had brought the game on around that time, that this was the future of the game, a possession running based game. But I think, like, to be fair to like that succession of people that Ger was a part of, John Allen and Donald O'Grady, like that suited the style of hurler that Cork had, no more than playing the way Kilkenny played suited the style of hurler that Kilkenny had. But you know, it was great to have those 2 years when Cork and Kilkenny were kind of at a peak. I know Cork were coming towards the end and Kilkenny were just taking off in much the same way as it was great to have Kilkenny and Tipperary when they were coming to a peak around 9, 10, 11. But like the first All Ireland that I covered was in 2007, and it was the day that Kilkenny incinerated Limerick, and then the following year was Waterford, and then by the time we got to 09, we're starting to think, like, are these ever going to lose a match? I remember leaving the press box that day and talking to Dermot O'Flynn from the Examiner, and we were saying, like, are they going to win 5 in a row? They're going to win 6, 7, 8 in a row. But it's mad, and it's you know, I know a lot of people are already back in Limerick to win this year's All Ireland, but there's probably echoes of it in the football as well. But it is crazy how you can be kind of building the team up to be this thing, and then it can all just come crashing down on one particular day. But yeah, like the whole question is the kind of the styles of the two teams. I think they were just, you know, the personalities clashed for some reason, but I think it was probably just because the two teams were so good and they were so ambitious.
Just on a point that Conor made there, JJ, like did you ever kind of look back as you were playing, like, and think, this is unbelievable what we're doing, like, and going for 5 in a row, like, in your wildest dreams you couldn't have imagined that your inter-county career would go like that? Are you conscious of that as it's going on, or is it only something you look back on now?
I know you would. You enjoy what you're doing at the moment. Why would you sacrifice so much time and effort throughout your whole year without enjoying every game as it goes? We had fabulous times, and we celebrated after games more than. I know that perception was out there that we just went on like robots, won the game, went back training that night, but we didn't. We went back and enjoyed ourselves that night, the day after as well. Like, you know what I mean? We had fabulous times, and I think the times off the field after the games brought the whole panel together there as well. And John, obviously, on the All-Star trips and all that kind of stuff, we kind of mingled with everyone as well, and we go crack with everyone too. So, yeah, I think that perception was built up, and that was kind of, from the outside looking in, probably very serious. But we had a job to do as well, and we wanted to win the game. But after the game, you kind of let down your hair and do what you want. But on the 2006, that was probably my biggest regret. I wasn't involved in that game.
That's right, yeah. And
crucial
a couple of weeks beforehand.
Yeah, it's a couple of weeks before. And all the lads referenced that 2006 was always, like, that was always said 2007, 2008, 2009. It was always there. We'll go back and we get the mentality of 2006. We just took over the game, and very hard for hear the rest of them talking about it, and you weren't involved in it yourself. And I only kind of got that back in 2011 when we done it against Tip, because Tip won the year before, and we were back and we bet him in the final year after. And then I realised what the actual lads done in 2006. Not till then. I heard him talking about, I kind of said, right, okay, but when I done it myself in 2011, I actually realised what effort they put in on the field that particular day. So, yeah, the one money we used regrets not playing that game, to be fair.
Sure, just looking at Cork going into this weekend, obviously, beat Westmeath at the weekend, put up a big score. I think it was the first time 40 points is hitting championship. Where do you see Cork coming into the kind of knockout stages now this year?
I say, Michael, coming in, I'd say they're kind of a bit unsure. I think they're, like, from a point of view of the, I think it's kind of widely recognised in the sense we have 6 very good forwards, and I think that, like, our scoring potential, I think, is really good. You know, they wrapped up 40 points last week, but small bit of a concern in the back line in that, you know, we conceded 20 points to Westmeath last week, and they played 2 sweepers. So, and they had 15 wides, I think somebody said. So, you know, that'd be a worry. I think our concern would be that our defence maybe isn't as settled as what it should be. So it's kind of going to be a bit of a battle between the two. I think I'd say probably Kilkenny are in the same boat, that their defence maybe is a bit unsettled as well. And, you know, again, potentially they've got very good forwards as well. And it could come down to that sort of scenario. Which of the two defences works out better? Because, you know, the big one for Cork on Sunday, who's going to mark TJ? You know, where they're going to, is it going to be, there's talks of Owen Cadigan might come out to mark him. Does Mark Ellis take him up? Or, you know, does Cody pull a rabbit and put TJ somewhere that he mightn't have played up to now? So I'd say we're kind of just, even though I suppose the public and the supporters would be confident enough in relation to that going to Croke Park, the weather is good. They feel they have a fast, pacey, fit team, that they may have too much hurling for Kilkenny. But I know to my detriment, like, you play Kilkenny and this is knockout. You know, all bets are off on Sunday. Like, so this could be a really, really tight game.
Vincent, wounded cats are usually the most dangerous, it would be fair to say.
100%, and I think there's a general assumption nearly growing that Cork are going to win this. And I was just talking to Ger about that before we started, and I think this is a really dangerous game for Cork, and I'm intrigued by Cork. It's funny, we did the podcast at the start of the year, Michael, and I thought I was being quite original in saying my tip for the All-Ireland was Cork, and it turns out they were your tip as well.
And Mullane has put his money down on Cork as well.
Is that right? Yeah. But I'd be a lot less sure now.
Sorry, John, that was off the record, sorry.
And one of the things I found incredible is, I mean, Jerry's talking about maybe Mark Ellis will pick up TJ. Mark Ellis wasn't even in the squad the first night they played Tip. I think he played a football match the night before and was on the terrace watching them. And suddenly he's come in, and there's the faith in Tim O'Mahony doesn't seem to be there. And the big thing when they were beaten by Tip was, well, Bill Cooper pulled up in the warm-up, and he was a huge miss because they lacked his physical presence in midfield. Well, Bill Cooper was in Ennis the day in the horrible rain that they weren't able for Clare. So I agree totally with Ger. I think they're phenomenal forwards. I think my personal favourite is Alan Cadigan. I love the way that fella plays as a corner forward. He's so full of aggression going for the ball. But I just don't know if they have the defensive solidity to have any real faith in them. And the hurling that TJ Reid is playing, I think Adrian Mullane had 2 very good games against Wexford, so he looks as if he's up to it. If Colin Fennelly can get into the game, I presume he's going to have Owen Cadigan on him. Owen Cadigan was taken off at half-time against Clare because he was going to get sent off, probably, if he wasn't taken off. That's going to be a battle to watch. Is Walter Walsh fit? If Walter Walsh is fit, I'd give Kilkenny a real chance in this game.
John, how do you see that going? Just Vincent mentioned how potent the Cork forward line are. Probably all 6 of them can hurt you in various different ways. How do you see Kilkenny's backs matching up against them? And do you think they'll be able to hold them to enough of an extent where they can win the game?
Well, I think they're going to ring the changes. I don't know how. I think Killian Buckley is key. We're seeing the last 2 days against Wexford, he's not fit. He's key to that back line. I would see him bringing in more lads in. Maybe possibly bringing in, is Conor Delaney going to come back? I thought he was very good throughout the course of the league. Might bring back in Tommy Welch. They lack pace in that back line. And the one thing Cork do have, they have pace, and they have it in abundance. And if you give that Cork forward line any bit of space, they're going to punish you all day long. It'll be interesting to see what way Kilkenny will set up. Will they zone and mark, or will they man mark and follow the men all over the place? And I suppose then you have that key area then in midfield, Fitzgibbon and Bill Cooper coming up against Fogarty and Richie Lai. But I think the key area for Cork is who's going to tie down TJ Reid. Do they have a player to tie down TJ Reid? And for me, looking at that Cork backline, I don't think they have a player to tie him down.
Conor, Cork have obviously, they're the only team that have beaten Limerick. Well, yeah, they're the only team that have beaten Limerick in League and Championship this year. There seemed to be the kind of the one team that can put it up to them. Limerick probably wouldn't wouldn't like Cork to be winning. They'd probably prefer Kilkenny to be winning. But like, what is it about Cork that they can seem to turn it on against certain teams, and maybe it's a lack of consistency maybe as well?
Well, I think what's like specifically to Limerick, they're one of the few teams that actually play high up the pitch. Like how often does Declan Hannon actually have to mark someone, as opposed to how often does Declan Hannon stand there kind of hurling ball? And Cork have been very good with either Harnedy or Conor Lehan just played up and force him into a situation where he has to man mark. But again, like that sometimes leave Cork a small bit vulnerable at the back. Like I think what Kilkenny will probably try and do, a bit like the game in 06, is try and make it a war, like make it very physical around the middle eight. Because like if you go back to the very start of the championship when Cork were beaten by Tipperary that day, okay, all the talk about the movement of the Tipperary forwards, but the aggression of them, like the physicality of them, they went around hunting the Cork backs, and Cork just weren't really able for it that day. So, I would imagine that's probably the method that Kilkenny will employ this weekend, because they tried it to a certain extent against Wexford, but they probably started going for goals a little bit early that day. So there's elements there. But again, it'll come down to, as Vincent said, like Walter Walsh, like very hard man to mark, very hard man to handle when he's fully fit, but he doesn't look fully right. And like Richie Hogan was on the bench the last day, but didn't seem to be kind of fit to come on to play some role. Colin Fennelly could have a day of days like he did down in Thurles a few years ago in the semi-final replay when he had Barry Coughlin in all sorts of trouble and scored a couple of goals. So like on their day, if all the things worked like that, I think Kilkenny have a serious forward line, but it's just we haven't seen it all kind of together at the same time. The one consistent, the one fella who has given them something in every single game has been TJ, and I think he's probably putting together an individual championship as strong as any single championship that Henry or Eddie Brennan or anybody ever put in, because his returns have been incredible.
Just a word on TJ, JJ. I'm sure you would have came across him, particularly when you're out halfback. Like he's turned into a phenomenon now at this stage. Realistically, he just seems to be the man. He's like the postman. He just seems to always deliver. Yeah,
he's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. What I like about him, he's not relying on anyone else to get into the game. Where as a back, you can actually hit the ball any way down to him. He can get it high, he can get it low, or even hits it. Even if it's in a position, he'll actually go work hard to get it and take it off someone else. He's underrated as a tackler as well. He's absolutely brilliant, so strong. He's the total package at the moment. He seems to be just getting better and better. I remember when he came in first, he was a bit green. He was kind of flicking balls over lads' heads now and doing lovely touches. All right,
so he got knocked into the next week a few times.
Cody let us have a few little digs at him. All right, now just kind of bring back down there a bit. But the talent was, the raw talent was there. And then I'd say you just looked at Henry and see how he was working, and he led by example. Henry did it in training every time, and I'd say he just kind of said, right, if I'm going to knuckle down here and get myself. But you see him physically, he's in phenomenal shape, and he owns a gym there inside Kilkenny, so he's obviously doing more than working in there as well, so. But a phenomenal player. But I agree with Vincent there. I think Walter Welsh is key to this Kilkenny team. He takes a lot of pressure off TJ, but I think Mark Coleman, Gerard probably talked way more about him. I think he's a phenomenal player, and he sets up so much of the Cork attacks. He just pings ball into corners. So I'd be hoping from Kenny point of view that Walter will be starting on Mark Coleman. He's a big guy. He could dominate him in the air, because Waterford actually done it with Brick Welsh there a couple of years ago in the semi-final, and he nullified Mark Coleman's effectiveness in the game. And Mark coming into that game was nearly odds on for an All-Star, and after that game he was nearly kind of he was written off, So I just think that if Walter could get in that area, and that will stop that, and then sure the centre back, whoever it is going to have to mind TJ, so he's not going to be hurling ball. So you take Mark Coleman, his delivery out of that is going to help the backs a lot as well. But I'd agree, I think we're going to have to bring it into a dogfight. It's not going to be only six backs, it's going to be two midfielders, which Conor Forty is absolutely brilliant at. Gets back in involved and gets in around and plugs in holes in around there as well. So if Kilkenny can do that, I think it's going to be vital. So Walter both offensively winning the wall and scoring a few points, but nullifying Mark Coleman's threat now is going to be huge for Kilkenny.
Boys, go on, just a quick bit on Mark Coleman.
Any more insights as to how's how they might line up? Is Walter Walsh at 10? Who's at 11? And who's I need to bring some information back to the lads just to take him up.
DJ's in full forward there. Yeah.
The big one for me is Richie Hogan, JJ. Richie Hogan, Richie Hogan is an unbelievable player, and he came on the last day in the 69th minute and got no game the week before, or the fortnight a week before against Wexford below, when they needed, a puck of a ball, and they could be out of the championships. I think
that's a great point, and I think particularly given the lack of composure that Kilkenny were showing at the time. I mean, it was like a complete role reversal of the Wexford-Kilkenny rivalry. And, you look at Wexford, they had 3 wides in the whole game. Kilkenny had 12. So Kilkenny had 4 times as many wides. When did that ever happen? And we saw that lack of composure. In the last 25 minutes, Wexford did not have a single wide, whereas the Kilkenny shooting was daft shooting at times. And I think, couldn't agree more with Ger. It was actually, I think, the 72nd minute they brought Richie Hogan on. What's the point of doing that?
It was because of an injury as well. That was the only reason he came on.
Yeah, but if he's able to come on in the 72nd minute, he's able to come on in the 60th minute. And I just think...
Or start the match.
It's a question I can't answer. Why was Richie Hogan brought on so late when they needed some wise head there?
Yeah, JJ, that must have been surprising as well. There was a panic at the end of the Leinster final, which is very uncharacteristic for your guys.
Yeah, I thought they had it. I think they were trying to push goals the whole game, to be honest with you. Tejas free to Colin just before half time, and they're trying to push the goal. I think they were probably thinking that if we get a goal against the sweeper system, it's a massive score. Like psychologically, it's a huge score because it's seven backs. You shouldn't be conceding goal. That's your first goal as a seven. If you have a sweeper, cut off all goal chances. But I think they were trying to push for goals. But again, if the last 10-15 minutes, Murphy was coming out 60 yards from the goal and lobbing it in. If you're going to do that, if Owen's coming out, you go for the point. You don't wait for your keeper to come in. He's going to wait for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. Where a half-back could do that. And then the ball is in there, you could end up, something could happen. But no, I think they kind of pushed a bit too much where there weren't opportunities there. But the one chance they did have,